Wow. You've really dug deep on this canine communication thing, huh? We've got experts lined up here on video talking about everything, really, from tail wags to, those little signs that your dog is stressed out.
Yeah.
So much to unpack here about what your dog wishes you knew.
Yeah, I know. It's a lot to think about. And honestly, it seems like so many people, they kind of get stuck on those dog park myths instead of really understanding what's going on, what their dog is really saying.
Totally. Like that thing everyone says, oh, wagging tail equals happy dog.
Right.
Not so fast.
Yeah, it's not always that simple. It's kind of like if you assume someone who's talking really fast is always excited, well, they could be nervous, right? Context is key, and that's especially true with dogs. So yeah, with those tail wags, it's about more than just the wag itself. The speed, how high it is, even which way it's leaning, all of that tells a story. One trainer pointed out that a slow, low wag, especially if the dog's body is kind of low to the ground, often means the dog is uncertain or even giving a warning.
Good point.
Yeah.
I've definitely been guilty of assuming a wag is always a good thing.
Right. And then there's the opposite, like a really high, stiff wag. That can be excitement, sure, but it can also be alertness or even getting ready to maybe get aggressive. It all depends on what else the dog is doing with their body. You have to look at a whole picture, not just one thing.
It's amazing how much goes into something as simple as a tail wag. I'm learning a whole new language. Speaking of language, all these trainers keep saying how expressive a dog's face is, the ears, the eyes, that mouth. Where do we even begin with all that?
Well, one of the trainers in the video said it perfectly. She said the mouth is the best barometer we have of a dog's internal state.
Yeah.
Because they can't actually tell us they're feeling off, right? So we have to read their faces. So a relaxed, open mouth, maybe their tongue is just kind of resting comfortably. That's usually a good sign. But a tense, closed mouth, or if the lips are pulled back into a V shape, those can be signs of stress or, even aggression.
So the opposite of that, big, goofy grin we all love.
Exactly. And then there's those eyes. Have you ever heard of whale eye?
Whale eye. Is that like those funny dog memes where they have those giant pleading eyes?
Not quite. Whale eye is when you can actually see the whites of their eyes, and it usually means stress or anxiety. You might see it during play, but if a dog is showing whale eye and things seem tense, it means they're feeling trapped or uncomfortable, and you gotta back off.
Okay, so next time I see that little bit of white in my dog's eye, I shouldn't just assume they're being goofy. I need to, check the situation and see if maybe they're stressed out.
Exactly. And don't forget those ears. They can be super expressive, ears pricked up and turned forward. That usually means they're alert and interested in something. But if the ears are held kind of back, not fully forward, but not flat against their head either, that can mean they're feeling unsure or conflicted about something. And then, of course, those flattened ears often mean they're feeling anxious or scared.
So basically, ears forward means interested, and flat ears usually mean not a fan of this.
That's a good way to simplify it, yeah. But just like with everything else, it's about the bigger picture. A dog might flatten their ears for a second during play, and that's totally normal. But if their ears are constantly pinned back, it's worth thinking about whether something is stressing them out.
Man, this is eye-opening. It's like I'm realizing I've been misinterpreting my own dog's signals this whole time.
It happens to a lot of dog owners. We want to think our dogs are always happy and having a good time, but just like us, they have good days and bad days. And learning to read their signals helps us look out for them better.
Speaking of looking out for our dogs, let's talk about playtime. Because letting dogs play seems pretty straightforward, right? You open the door, they run around, everybody's happy. But it's not always that easy, is it?
Unfortunately, no. We all want our dogs to have fun and be social, but we also have to make sure everyone stays safe.
So how can you tell when playtime is maybe crossing the line into not actually fun territory? What are some red flags to watch out for?
One of the biggest red flags is when you see one-sided play. One dog is always chasing, pinning down, or just not giving the other dog a break. That can turn into bullying really fast.
I've totally seen that at the park, where it's clear one dog is uncomfortable, but the other one just isn't picking up on the cues.
And that's when those little signs of stress we talked about, the lip licking, the yawning, even growling can escalate. And if the dog who's uncomfortable feels like they have to defend themselves, it can even lead to a fight.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So how much does size difference matter in those situations? Is it okay if they both seem to like roughhousing, even if there's a big size difference?
Actually, size difference is a big deal, and a lot of these trainers mention this. 25 pounds.
25 pounds. Is that like a magic number or something?
It's not that the number itself is magic, but it represents a size difference where a larger dog could seriously hurt a smaller one, even if they're just playing.
So even if they both mean well, a playful tumble could mean an emergency vet visit if there's a big size difference.
Exactly. It's basic physics, the force of a larger dog. And smaller dogs are especially vulnerable to neck injuries if they get shaken or tossed around.
Okay, 25 pounds is our benchmark. Got it. What other red flags should we be looking for during playtime?
One trainer talked about something called flat gait. It's when a dog runs with their body kind of flat and parallel to the ground. Often it means they're anxious or trying to escape the situation. Another one is when a dog keeps trying to get out of the play area or hides. Those are all signs that a dog isn't having fun and probably needs a break.
So these are all things we can actually see happening. But what if we're just not sure if a dog is truly enjoying themselves? Is there any way to actually test that?
There is. One of the trainers suggested something she calls the consent test.
A consent test for dogs. I like where this is going. Tell me more.
It's simple, but it's so smart. Basically, you separate the dogs for a minute and see if they choose to go back to playing. So you take the dog who's maybe being a little too pushy and keep them with you for a bit. And then you let the other dog, the one you're not sure about, decide if they want to keep playing. If they go up to the other dog and try to get things going again, they were probably fine with how things were. But if they move away, avoid the other dog, or even seem relieved that the interaction is over, that's a pretty clear sign they weren't having fun and maybe need a different playmate or a break from socializing.
I love that. It lets the dog actually tell you what they're comfortable with.
Exactly. It's all about learning their language, both the obvious stuff and those more subtle cues.
Okay, so we've talked about red flags, and we even have a way to check in with our dogs about whether they're having fun or not. But what does good play actually look like? What are some positive signs that everyone is having a blast and staying safe?
One of the best signs is something called role reversal, where the dogs switch roles throughout the interaction.
So like the chaser becomes the chased, or the dog who was on top during a play wrestle ends up on the bottom.
Yep. It shows that both dogs are cool with taking turns and no one is stuck on the receiving end of all the rough stuff.
Makes sense. It keeps things fair and fun for everyone.
Yeah.
What else should we look for?
Another great sign is what trainers call meta signals. Basically, it's the dog's way of saying, hey, relax, this is all pretend.
Dogs can do that. They have signals for just kidding.
They do. Some common ones are play bows, those big bouncy movements, and even something called happy face.
Happy face. I think I can picture that one.
It's that over-the-top, almost goofy expression some dogs get when they're playing. Wide eyes, open mouth, maybe even a little crazy eye action going on.
It's like the dog version of saying, don't worry, this is all in good fun.
Exactly. They're making sure everyone's on the same page, even if there are playful nips and those big, exaggerated movements.
It's incredible how much we miss if we're not paying attention to these little cues. But what about those dogs, maybe even our own, who don't really fit the mold? What if your dog isn't really into playing with other dogs, or they're a little too enthusiastic and tend to bully other dogs at the park?
Those are great questions, and the experts definitely had some thoughts. Let's start with dogs who maybe aren't big on socializing. Not every dog loves a good game of chase, and that's totally okay.
Totally. Not all dogs are party animals. But if they're not socializing with other dogs, how do we make sure they're still getting enough exercise and enrichment?
One trainer put it perfectly. She said, the world is your oyster. You just have to be creative and tap into your dog's personality and what they naturally love to do.
That reminds me of something I saw from that canine enrichment group. They were talking about incorporating species-specific behaviors.
That's such a great approach. It's about thinking about what your dog was bred to do and finding safe and fun ways to let them do it.
Like, if you've got a dog who loves to dig, lean into it. Give them a digging zone in the yard or a sandbox to go nuts in.
And mental enrichment is just as important. Things like puzzle toys, snuffle mats, even scattering their food around instead of using a bowl, all those things challenge their minds and keep them engaged, even if they'd rather skip the dog park.
So many awesome ideas for keeping our dogs happy and enriched, even if they're not into the whole dog park scene. Now, let's flip the script and talk about those dogs who maybe get a little too into playtime. What about dogs who are kind of bullies on the playground? The experts had some really interesting things to say about that.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because sometimes the owners have no idea it's happening or they think it's cute when their dog is actually being a bully. But we have to remember that the dog on the receiving end isn't having fun.
Yeah, it's just like those schoolyard bullies who pick on the kids they see as weaker. So why would a dog bully other dogs? And more importantly, what can we do about it?
Well, the experts had a few ideas. One is pretty simple. Sometimes it's just a lack of proper socialization, especially when they're puppies.
That makes sense. Puppies are like little sponges soaking everything up.
Hmm.
If they don't have good experiences with different dogs early on, they may not learn how to act around other dogs later.
Exactly. One trainer even said that puppies should meet at least 50 different dogs during that key socialization window.
50 dogs. That's a lot of puppy play dates.
It sounds like a lot, but the more positive interactions they have with different dogs, the better they'll be at handling social situations when they're older.
It's about building that foundation for social success. So lack of socialization is one reason for bullying. What else did the experts say?
Another interesting factor they talked about is impulsivity. Apparently, there's a genetic component to it, which is fascinating.
So some dogs are just hardwired to be a little more shoot first, ask questions later, like that friend we all have who always puts their foot in their mouth.
Exactly. And with dogs, that impulsivity can look like not having good bite inhibition, having trouble settling down, and just generally bulldozing through those subtle social cues.
It's like their internal volume knob is stuck on high.
Yeah, and sadly, those dogs often get labeled as aggressive when really they might just need a little extra help navigating social situations because their brains work a bit differently.
It's not about slapping a label on them. It's about figuring out what they need and helping them be the best dog they can be. So we've got lack of socialization and impulsivity, two big pieces of the puzzle. What was the third thing the trainers mentioned?
The third one, and this is the one that can be tougher to deal with, is that sometimes dogs just enjoy bullying other dogs.
Really? They get something out of it.
Unfortunately, yeah. And it often comes down to insecurity or needing to feel in control. They might pick on certain dogs, ones that are smaller, shyer, or less confident because it makes them feel more powerful.
That's so sad. So if we see this happening, whether it's at the park or even if it's our dog who's doing the bullying, what can we do?
I loved what one trainer who specializes in canine aggression had to say about this. Her advice was simple: leave.
Leave. Just pack up and go.
Yep. Her whole point was that even if it feels unfair to leave because of someone else's dog, it's often the best thing you can do for your own dog.
That's a good point, because trying to reason with the owner of a dog who's bullying other dogs usually doesn't go well, especially if they're not open to feedback. And trying to get in the middle of it could make things worse and put everyone in danger.
Exactly. Sometimes removing yourself and your dog from the situation is just the safest and kindest thing to do, even if it's a bummer.
That's such good advice.
Yeah.
It's like knowing when to fold them in poker. Sometimes it's the smartest move, even if it stings a little.
It's about putting your dog's well-being first, even if it means making a quick exit.
Well said. And speaking of knowing when to make a strategic retreat, the experts had a lot to say about another potentially tricky situation: those on-leash greetings.
Right. It's like you said, sometimes you just gotta know when to walk away. And speaking of those strategic retreats, let's talk about on-leash greetings. Those can be so tricky, even for dogs who are usually super friendly.
It's true. We've all been there. Like that awkward sidewalk dance when you've got one dog on leash and the other one isn't.
Yeah.
Why is it that even if both dogs are usually good with other dogs, those on-leash greetings can be so unpredictable?
I think it goes back to that feeling of being trapped. Like when a dog is on a leash, they don't have that freedom to move around, and that can make them feel anxious or even threatened, especially if a dog they don't know comes running up to them off leash.
It's like being stuck in a conversation at a party when you'd rather be off talking to someone else.
Yeah.
You can't really escape, and it's just awkward.
Totally. And dogs are so tuned into body language, they definitely pick up on those limitations. It's not that they're suddenly aggressive or anything, it's just that they can't communicate and interact naturally because of the leash.
So is it best to just avoid on-leash greetings altogether?
Yeah, most trainers recommend playing it safe and avoiding those on-leash interactions whenever you can. It's less stressful for everyone, really, but of course sometimes you can't avoid it.
Right. Like, what if you're walking down a narrow trail and some off-leash dog comes barreling towards you and your leash dog? You can't exactly vanish into thin air.
Exactly. That's where having a game plan can be a lifesaver. One of the trainers actually recommended practicing those just-in-case scenarios in your head so you can react calmly and know what to do.
I love that. Like having a mental escape route planned out in advance.
Exactly. So for example, if you see an off-leash dog coming at you, her advice was to toss some treats in the opposite direction as a distraction. That gives you and your dog a chance to make a quick getaway.
That's brilliant. Redirecting the situation without putting yourself or your dog in a potentially risky encounter. Okay, so on-leash greetings, check. What about those of us who like the idea of dog parks, But maybe our dogs are still learning the ropes of socializing, or maybe we're just super picky about who they play with. Any tips for navigating that?
These experts had tons to say about choosing good playmates, and it goes way beyond just, does my dog seem to get along with other dogs?
It's like planning a play date for kids.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't just throw them together and hope for the best, right? You'd think about their personalities, how they like to play, if they'd actually enjoy each other's company.
Exactly. And with dogs, it's even trickier because they can't exactly tell us, hey, I don't really mesh with that one over there. So we have to be extra observant and really proactive in setting them up for success.
So what are some of the key things to look for when you're trying to find a good playmate for your dog?
Well, first and foremost, look for dogs who have a really solid social history. One trainer used the term bomb-proof, which I love.
Bomb-proof, like they've seen it all and nothing phases them.
Exactly. They're those dogs who have a ton of experience with other dogs. They're comfortable in all kinds of situations, and they're generally well-behaved and predictable. They make awesome role models for younger or less experienced dogs because they demonstrate what good play etiquette looks like.
They sound like the dog equivalent of that friend who's always the life of the party, but never gets out of control. So solid social history is key. What else should we be thinking about?
Size and temperament matching are super important too. We talked about the 25-pound rule earlier, but it's worth repeating that size difference can be a recipe for accidental injury, even during play.
Right, like a playful paw from a Great Dane could send a Chihuahua flying.
Exactly. And it's not just about physical size, it's about matching play styles too. If you've got a dog who's all about wrestling and roughhousing, they're probably not going to be the ideal match for a dog who prefers gentle sniff and stroll kind of play.
It's about finding those compatible canine pals who are on the same wavelength. Now, what if you're just not sure about a dog's social history or temperament? Is there a way to, test the waters a bit before letting them loose together?
Definitely. One trainer suggested starting with parallel walks.
Parallel walks. You mean like walking the dog side by side but not letting them interact directly?
Exactly. Keep a safe distance so they can see and smell each other, but they're not close enough to engage. It gives you a chance to watch their body language and get a sense of whether they seem relaxed or stressed.
Like a low-key meet and greet before any major commitments.
Exactly. And if everything seems cool during the parallel walk, you can gradually close the distance, maybe even let them sniff each other quickly while you're right there supervising.
It's all about those baby steps, giving them time to warm up to each other before things get too intense. And I'm guessing the consent test we talked about earlier would be a good tool to use here too, just to double check that everyone's comfortable.
Absolutely. Always a good idea, especially in new situations or when you're unsure about things.
This is such great advice. It's easy to get caught up in wanting our dogs to have a blast that we forget to make sure they're safe and comfortable first and foremost.
It's a balancing act for sure, and sometimes it means making the tough call, even if it ruffles some feathers.
Speaking of tough calls, there's one more thing these experts kept bringing up that I think deserves its own deep dive. These controlling behaviors that dogs use.
Yes. Those subtle but super important ways that dogs try to set boundaries, even in the middle of playing.
Like they're waving little red flags that we often miss or totally misinterpret. Ready to dig into those sneaky, controlling behaviors that dogs use to set boundaries even when they're playing with each other.
Yeah, this is something that even people who've had dogs their whole lives can learn from. We miss those subtle signals or think they're being cute or something, when really the dog might be stressed out or uncomfortable.
So let's clear this up. What exactly are controlling behaviors when we're talking about dogs? What do they actually look like?
Think of it as the dog's way of saying, hey, this is a bit much. Can you cool it down a bit? Except they're saying it with their body, not words. And these behaviors often happen during play, but not always. You see them in other situations too, like when dogs are greeting each other or even interacting with people.
Their way of saying, dude, chill, but without actually saying it.
Exactly. And that's where it gets tricky. These behaviors can look a lot like when a dog is being playful or affectionate. You have to really pay attention to when it's happening and how intense it is. It's not just about the behavior itself. It's what the rest of their body is doing and how the other dog is reacting.
Okay, so context and intensity are super important. Can you give me some examples of these controlling behaviors that the trainers talked about?
Sure. One that's pretty common is the chin over. That's when a dog kind of drapes their chin or their head over the other dog's back, almost like they're trying to pin them down.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that. I always thought it was just a dominance thing. I'm the boss here?
It can look like that for sure. But the experts said that if it goes on for a long time or the other dog seems uncomfortable, It's probably not playful. It's a controlling behavior.
So if the dog who's getting the chin rest is like, okay, that's enough, but the other dog keeps doing it, that's a bad sign.
Yep, and the same goes for another one. Putting a paw on the other dog's back. It might seem cute, but if they keep the paw there and the other dog seems tense or looks away or tries to move away, it might be that the paw placer is trying to control things.
It's like those people who always got to have their arm around you even when you're trying to subtly edge away. Not everyone likes being that close, and dogs are the same way.
Right. They might not be able to say, give me some space, but their bodies are definitely talking.
So chin over and paw on back. What else should we be looking out for?
Here's one that might surprise people. Humping.
Wait, really? I always thought humping was just dogs being dogs.
Sometimes it is. But the trainers pointed out that humping, especially when the dog is also kind of hugging with their front legs, can actually be a controlling behavior, especially if it's obvious the other dog is not into it.
So there's a difference between playful humping and controlling humping.
Definitely. Again, it's all about the context. Playful humping is usually short and sweet, and both dogs seem relaxed. But when it's being used to control the other dog, it goes on longer. The other dog might look stressed or try to get away, and the humper might get pushy or frustrated if the other dog tries to stop it.
Okay, that's super helpful to know. It's not always about the behavior itself,
Yeah.
but about what else is going on and how the dogs are reacting. Any other controlling behaviors we should know about?
One trainer mentioned something called muzzle punching. Have you ever seen that one?
Muzzle punching. Doesn't sound too friendly.
It's not. And thankfully, it's not as common as some of those other ones. Basically, it's when one dog keeps bumping or nudging the other dog with their muzzle, often pretty forcefully.
Yeah, that sounds like it could be uncomfortable for the other dog.
It can be you. Muzzle punching is often a sign that a dog is frustrated or stressed or overwhelmed. It's definitely a sign that you might need to step in.
Okay, so let's talk about that. If we see our own dog doing these controlling behaviors, the chin over the paw on the back, the humping, the muzzle punching, what should we actually do?
The trainers had some good advice. It really depends how bad it is and what's happening. Sometimes just separating them for a minute or two is enough to get things back on track.
Like giving kids a timeout in separate corners to cool down.
Exactly. Sometimes just calling your dog away from the situation and giving them something else to focus on helps a lot. A quick redirection can give everyone a chance to calm down and reset.
So it's a good idea to have some of those redirection strategies up our sleeve.
Yeah.
What about if you've got a dog who just seems to do these controlling behaviors all the time?
That's when you need to think about the bigger picture. If it's a constant thing, it might mean they need a different play group, or maybe they need some extra help learning how to control their impulses.
We have to remember that not every dog is cut out for every play group or every playmate. And just because a dog loves to play rough doesn't mean all dogs will.
Exactly. It's about respecting each dog as an individual, paying attention to their personality and what kind of play they enjoy, and making sure they feel safe and comfortable.
We've covered so much today, from tail wags and whale eyes to consent tests and all those subtle ways dogs try to control each other. It's amazing what you can learn just by paying closer attention to how dogs communicate.
It really is. It's a journey, and you're always learning something new, especially since every dog is different.
So to everyone listening, I hope this has inspired you to brush up on your dog communication skills. Pay attention to the little things. Learn to read your dog's unique language. And don't be afraid to reach out to a good trainer or behaviorist if you need help. Because the more we understand our dogs, the better our relationships with them will be.